So, Anton, you suggested we should start, so yes. Some known faces and here, and not too many people, and maybe I'm going to walk back and forth, so don't fall down the stairs. Let's see what we have on the agenda today. Remember the survey, in case someone hasn't done that. We have approximately 15% answering the survey, and I guess that's the most active people who clicks on everything. So it showed some, but people wanted general stuff about architecture and people to talk about. If anyone had knowledge about AWS, they wanted to hear about it. And some other things, but I haven't dived down into the numbers yet. Again, we had this last time. Anton is running this, myself, Anders, and Arne. And you can also see the names and contact details on the previous meetups as well. The presentation was uploaded there. Today's meeting, pizza and drink sponsored by Nordcloud as normal. Thanks a lot. And then we'll just take a quick look at what's new from AWS. Then I'll talk about Elasticity and the economy in AWS in the cloud. And then Erling will talk about CVPartner and his experiences from startup there. Hello, you're error there.
There, I think, yeah.
And next meeting, we haven't set any dates yet, but probably in 2016.
Yeah.
January.
Late January, early February.
Middle, late. Yeah.
Something.
Something.
Which I got from people who answered this survey is that most people wanted to have on a monthly basis and every keeps
Yeah.
6 weeks.
All the people who are not here.
Yeah.
New in AWS, we started with that last time, basically because I noticed that there's a lot of new things happening. And what we noticed now, since we're sharing, 3 of us are sharing this presentation on Google Docs and adding the news. And I've been away for a weekend now, so I asked the 2 other guys to add what was new. And I said, well, this is what I found. And then I browsed my mailbox and I found additional stuff. So obviously, it takes at least 3 people to find all the news from AWS between the meetings. The list isn't as long as last time, but I added something, and then perhaps others can tell me what they have added later. AWS is now ISO 27017 certified, which provides implementation guidance on information security controls that specifically relate to cloud services. It says, I haven't read that certification, but it ties in with is it the 16, 27016, I guess? There were another one just previously, or 18.
If I remember correctly, on the last couple of ISO certifications that they got, they comply with EU directives, which can be then replacement for the safe harbor.
Yeah, because the other one, which is, I think it's 16, relates to how they handle personal data. And then this is specifically for the cloud environment, and they have both. So I think Microsoft was the first one who got the other one, and AWS got this one first. So they're kind of fighting there, but that's good that the cloud providers are doing it. The mentioned last time, the EC2 dedicated host is now available. Beanstalk has been updated with environment links. which means that you can get, if you're setting up like web tier and worker tier and stuff like that, you can get automated links between the environments and things like that, which you had to make a workaround earlier. So it's a small enhancement. The console features for the container services has been updated. I don't know the details. Arne just added the autoscaling instance termination protection, which I think was new yesterday.
Yeah, it was probably yesterday it was announced.
Yeah.
So typically a nice thing to use if you have something running on one of the autoscaling instances, and when you then get a scale-in situation, then you're secured from that instance being terminated.
And we can look at it in a couple of minutes because I have the autoscaler demo running. Encryption at rest for Aurora was also released yesterday, I guess.
Yep.
I can just add comment to autoscale. I don't know if you mentioned this, but for some situations when you have, say, cron jobs which are executed on, and which should be executed just on one server, you can now place this also into autoscaling group, just to make sure that it's not going to be terminated. Because previously, without this feature, I used to have autoscaling group plus one extra server which I manage somehow, because it has to be only one, not more.
Then we have the AWS config. You can now track dedicated host instances and license compliance, and that was an update from the dedicated hosts, which were released around reInvent things, so now it's easier to track that. Route 53 was actually released, like some enhanced features there last week. Something around the traffic flow and how you set up rules and stuff for that. If you want to direct, if you're working globally and want to direct different users or different countries or whatever into different endpoints. I just saw it in an email, but I didn't have time to read it. So if you're dependent on some global routing there, check it out. And also on the machine learning side, they have done something with enhanced validation of the data in the learning process. I don't know if anyone has looked into the machine learning yet, but you take a huge bunch of data and then you chop it up. So you try to teach it with one part, and then you use another part to validate. And they've enhanced how you split it, and obviously they say it should be better. So I think that was what we found of news. Anyone else with more news? So basically, I think that was that one, and then I'll switch to my talk if there are no comments. Let's see. This is part of a presentation that I've done, which I called Cloud Scalability in Action. I've done it several times, but it's been like 45 minutes to an hour. But I guess you know a lot of the details, so we don't need to dive into the general AWS stuff. So I'm going to talk a bit about the scalability in the cloud, and also look into some of the how we can build applications to do the scalability. And from what I've heard from people, it's an eye-opener for some people to actually see how it can be scaled and how it impacts the economy here. And normally I'm also working a lot with software design, solution architecture, stuff like that, and not only on the infrastructure part. So basically what I'm telling people also, and some of the things I'm saying here is quite basic for you, but when you talk to people as well who asks about the cloud and stuff like that, refer them to that definition. It's only 2 pages which says what cloud computing is, and it helps just explain what is cloud computing. As I discussed with Arne, he said that Oracle had a cloud, and when you were initially initially making an account, you filled out the form, pressed create account, and what happened then was that an email was generated and some people were sitting punching it in. Through that definition, that's not the cloud service, because it has to be self-service and not. I'm going to use that example now in every speech. So this is a drawing from I found on the net, which says something about the definition, cloud definition, about the characteristics, about the delivery model, and also the deployment models. So what I'm just going to look at here is the characteristics about rapid elasticity, because a lot of people think that you can scale, you can add some servers now and then or remove them and stuff like that, but it's really fast, and it's stunning to see, even for people who has worked with AWS. I've seen people that say, wow, when they're looking into the load balancer and stuff like that. How many here are using the load balancer, auto scaling, and stuff like that? Some? Yeah. Some are not. So new for some, and at least a few of you. Also in my examples there, I'm talking about you have the old world infrastructure in weeks, where you had to go to the IT department and ask for a server or ask for more disk space and stuff like that, and you had to create a ticket, and they had an SLA saying that if it wasn't urgent, it will take a week to get it because the KPIs were set a week, so why do it quicker, and so on. I also talked to a company earlier which had outsourced some of their infrastructure to a supplier, not cloud, but one of the larger ones, and just getting a public IP address was 1,500 NOK. So when they were going to do some testing and needed 10 IPs, it was 15,000 kroner. One time, not refundable, so if you needed it just for a few minutes, it was expensive, and then you had to find a project to put it on and so on. But of course, working with AWS, we know that we can do this fairly quickly. Also, when you're talking about scalability, it's important to know about how the AWS infrastructure is built up. And we talked about it last time as well, that they have announced new regions which are coming next year. For those of you who haven't used the autoscaler and stuff like that, we're talking about regions, which is geographically places, and then we're talking about zones, which are zones in the same area. But you can look at it as several data centers. So like in Ireland, you have 3 zones. They are independent, and one of them can break without affecting the other one.
Interrupt you?
Yeah, interrupt.
If you go to the previous slide, actually the biggest one, which is US East, it has 6 zones, and one availability zone can spread up to 6 real data centers.
Yeah, I'm getting back to that, but one zone can span several data centers, but when you're looking at it from a user perspective, you can look at one zone as one data center. And when you're talking about the different zones, so if we're looking like Ireland has 3 zones, the distance between the availability zones from a technical point of view is 1 to 2 milliseconds on private fiber. If we're going to another region, it's typically 60, 70 milliseconds or more round trip. So it's harder to do synchronous calls across regions than between zones. So typically, when you're talking about scalability and load balancing and stuff, you want to spread it through different zones in the same region. there are also, as you said, one data center or one zone can consist of several data centers. And we're talking about between 50 and 80,000 physical servers in each data center. And they built their own disk racks to be able to stack a lot of disks. So the disk racks they built is, I think it weighs something between 500 and 1,000 kilos each 19-inch rack. And I also was on re:Invent on a talk about that. It's quite interesting. They're also building their own firmware to the power supply to the data centers, because the normal firmware for power supplies is, if I'm not talking about the small power supplies in the racks, but the substations which take the voltage down. Normally, it's made to protect the circuits. So if it detects an error, it just shut down the supplies. But when you're running a data center, you want to just push power into it as long as possible. And they couldn't get anyone supplying substations with that kind of firmware because they didn't want to give any guarantees on that. So they're writing that. A lot of other fun stuff on that talk, I think it was last year. They talked about how they were building. And they had like trucks coming in 365 days a year with equipment. And no equipment at all is leaving the data centers intact. So they have shredders for disks and memory and all that stuff. So what goes in doesn't come out at all.
And also, in some availability zones, there are so many data centers just connected to each other. And when you launch the instance, you think, okay, I will take the first one. So you create, for example, US East 1A, and you use it. But they say that when they started, they received some complaints from people that people think that AWS is small because 1.8 is not available, for example. So most of them select the first one by default, and since it's not available, then Amazon is not so big. And that's why they increase the default one from 1 to 6, so that you can always find a place for you there. And for some people, it's also important that when we program things, that you have to get available zones for you, because it's not always that you get access to all zones.
And you could notice also the scalability there when they started in Germany. I think I had some problems getting servers in the right size. So it varies, but now it's been quite stable. But back to the scalability and dropping the hardware we tend to. It's just about understanding the concept of different zones in a region, because that's fundamental if you want to build an application that is geo-redundant, and also redundancy from fault tolerance and stuff like that. So that's what we're diving into now. So I've a live demo, so I thought we could look into how it works, and also going through some principles here later. We'll look at use the EC2, the compute resources, the load balancer, and also Elastic Beanstalk, which I think is fantastic when you're just going to play with auto scaling and the load balancer. Beanstalk, anyone using that? You've used everything.
Well, I actually don't use it so much, but I see
you've tried it.
People struggling with it.
I think you have to use the right tools. So just if we're looking at one example application, just make a very simple diagram with a web server front down. You have some app servers running, and then a database, which is quite typical. At least when I'm out with customers who have legacy systems and stuff like that. And also actually people building in the cloud, they're building an application which is like that and is hard to scale. Let's see. So the question is, if we're going to see how we could or should scale it, how will that affect the cost? We have two aspects of scaling it. One is to be able to handle the traffic and be fault tolerant, but also on the cost side, which when I started looking at that was quite interesting. The first question is, what will it cost to run on premises? It's quite hard to know, and everybody I ask, which is running an IT operation, basically can't say. They can say how much it costs to buy some servers, but not the total cost because it's very hard to figure out. So just to not make it too complicated, let's say we're just seeing an application which is used Monday to Friday during work hours with a load that might go like this, which is quite typical for a lot of applications. If you look at the cost of that and just taking the database out of the equation here and just looking at the servers, if we need a 15 gigabyte 4 CPU server to run each tier here, it will cost $45 a week according to the price list when I made the calculations, so it might have changed. And you should be really good if you're able to find a server which makes exact that and you don't have a lot of waste, because typically you will have 40, 50, 60, 70% waste when you're buying a server and running this. But it also goes for the cloud if you're just starting up a server. You'll probably get some waste if you're just starting up a large server. So the key is trying to do something with that. So $90 a week approximately. But if you split it, if you build the application smart and split it horizontally in smaller servers, what happens then? Then you're down to $16 for each tier per week. And you have to add the load balancer, which is from $5 a week or more. So basically what you get just by building a smart application is that you get more than 50% savings. And then you can scale up and down and meet the exact requirements as well. A lot of people don't think about cloud and the economics in that way because they're just looking at it, how should we build it, and how much is the bandwidth, and so on and so and so. But when you're looking at the numbers, you see that the real savings are actually by using the elasticity in the cloud and scaling up and down and being smart about that. And I haven't even added, like I know Arne is looking at spot instances, or you can prepay for a year if you have a base server running all the time and stuff like that, which will save you more. So down from 90 to 41. Just to have a quick look at the if we're lucky, here we are. Questions so far or comments? Just feel free. I thought I'll do a demo later on. I have one application running in Ireland, but since some you are using Beanstalk and the others have probably looked at it, probably not. Beanstalk is quite good if you're just going to test the load balancer, the autoscaler, and set up some servers and build a demo application. Basically, there the mouse is. You can run a pre-configured Java, Node.js, PHP, Python, Ruby, Tomcat, Go, Docker setup, and now I lost the network or something like that. Or my application died. Network glitch in my end. You just start it up with one click. You can also go through a wizard, but if you're doing the one-click start on the Beanstalk, it just starts up a web server with an Nginx frontend, and now it runs PHP. So basically what you do with that when it's up and running is that you upload a zip file with the structure. If you have a Java stack, you upload a var file, and so on. So it's quite good for just testing out things, getting up and running quick. And you can also set up several environments, but we can look into that later. So bear in mind that some of this is quite basic for you, but not for all of you. It takes approximately 4 minutes to spin it up, and it starts up load balancing, auto scaling, everything there in a VPC, if you specify that. Let's get back to the example application again. What I talked about when we're talking about scaling in the different tiers here, it's important to build the application so we can scale the different tiers individually, because sometimes you can get a high load on the front, sometimes at the back. You might have some other services here. As Anton said, you have a cron job, you have a clock server, you have whatever. So if you're looking into the architectural side of this, I don't know how many of you have looked into the 12-factor app, which is quite popular when you're building like microservices and things like that. Erling is saying yes, and the rest is...
I think everybody should basically read that document.
Yeah. And that document it's not very big. It's like I talked about the definition initially here with 2 pages, and this website isn't that big at all, actually. It contains some information. It's just a methodology for building software as a service apps. About having a clean contract with the underlying operating system, offering maximum portability between execution environments, suitable for deployments on modern platforms, etc. And it's basically 12 different points you should have as a checklist when you're building a new application. So look it up and live by it, and it makes your life simpler, easier, and cheaper. Like configuration. Everything that's likely to vary between deploys, keep it out of the application. You know, resources to handle, credentials. Remember the guy who checked in his credentials in GitHub? It was in his code. That was expensive.
It's not just one guy.
Oh yeah, but that's the one who is really known. A lot of people are doing that, not only AWS credentials, but people are doing it all the time.
Project for a bot that crawls to keep AWS credentials and then launches instances running itself to crawl more GitHub account.
And it's not just not AWS, it's all, you're seeing it every day.
Actually, AWS itself. Because I once received an AWS official letter which said that you have actually posted back like 2 years ago. So
Why did you do that?
it was long time ago. And, yes, actually, I know.
It says something about the backing services as well, how you should connect to other services. So it's really like the microservices stuff, whether you connect to an email service, database, processing, whatever. Keep it clean, keep it separate. You should think processes when you're building these services, so you're not mixing and matching everything together. And it's also think stateless, of course, because you want to throw away the different services and the different processes when you're not using it. Concurrency says something about that, as I mentioned some slides ago. And disposability, it should be quick and easy to just dispose a process, so you don't have a lot of job to do when you're throwing it away or kicking the server out if you have scaled up. So that's just some examples on that. But back to the example we were talking about and going to look at. When we talked about the initial one, when I talked about scaling, what we actually get in AWS when you're starting up the load balancer is that you're also getting the redundancy between different, not regions, but different sites. And in addition, you get the auto scaling in this, and that helps you a lot when it comes to operations, because you can start and stop it, or it starts and stops servers for you automatically. In addition to some of the stuff we're talking about here, of course, you have to know your AWS things like security group and DNS and storage and stuff like that. So back to the example and the demo app here. So I started up a Beanstalk in Ireland here, which is running here now. And for those of you who has not used Beanstalk, there is a configuration in Beanstalk where you can configure the software running there. You can configure the scaling of the application. You can configure how you're doing updates and deployments and so on. But that's basically just configuring the underlying load balancer, auto scaling, and some magic as well, depending on what you're tuning here. So the most interesting thing is just to scale up here. Right now, we're running EC2 management console. I'm running one server. That was not the server. Let's look at the EC2 console. That was the autoscaler, I think. Right now, we have one server running this application, which is the PHP application, just looking at the local, getting the local IP from the server and the date and time. So if we're saying that we want to have a minimum of 3, a maximum of 6 servers, we can configure that in Beanstalk. You can also configure a lot of other things, what kind of zones you want them to be in. And you can also, in the autoscaler, tell it what you should trigger on. If you should trigger on the CPU, if you should trigger on disk, network latency, and so on. So if you're going to use the autoscaler and not using the CPU, utilization is probably the easiest one to understand, because when you're looking at the request counts and stuff like that, it's harder to know what thresholds to set. But the example now, I said that if you're looking into the CPU utilization, I'm saying that if on a percent basis, if you're above 75% for a minimum of 5 minutes, it adds a server. And if it goes below 50%, it removes a server, because you don't want to start and stop all the time. You can also add time-based scaling. So instead of saying that we have a minimum of 3, a maximum of 6 all the time, you can say that during daytime you have 3, 6, and during nighttime you have 1, 3, for example. So you can scale it up at 8 in the morning, because you know you will have traffic. But let's just apply that, and then magic starts happening. Hopefully. And it takes a couple of minutes, and then it spins up other servers. Also remember that you can run the load balancer and the autoscaler with just one server, even though you don't need more, just to ensure that it starts again if it dies, for example. So if the server hangs for some reason, not necessarily that it dies, but you might have some problems with the CPUs or threads or anything like that, so it looks like it's alive, but it's not answering. Then you can configure health checks and see if it's responding okay, and then it's running, starting up new ones. So since you are experienced in the console, we can see what's happening. Not yet, because it's configuring, running through the stack and doing a lot of configuration, so it takes some time, at least when you're doing it through Beanstalk, because I guess in the back here they're using some sort of CloudFormation stuff going on. It looks like that. So you're not seeing it. And you also get an S3 bucket with a lot of stuff in when you're using Beanstalk. But I've used Beanstalk a lot just to spin up and test various things in the autoscaler and the load balancer here, also in deploying applications like a red-green deployment and things like that. I can show you that later as well. U-events. So it's going through I guess it's using the CloudFormation because it takes approximately the same time, and you can see some of the same events doing different stuff.
You tried adding, for example, a tag to an instance created by Beanstalk and see if it breaks it?
No, I haven't. I've tried a lot without breaking it, and not a tag to an instance, if that's what you were thinking about. So servers are coming up. And then if you're looking into the autoscaler load balancer, let's look at that. You have the instances, and it says that one is in service and one is auto service. Either that's one which I just was playing with earlier. No, it was not. That's probably one of those starting up now. And then there's the other one. And then it checks, it has a health check running, so it waits until it has 2 OK pings on the application getting an HTTP 200 before it puts it into service. And you can configure the health check as well, so decide whether the server is healthy or not. Or you can do it time-based, which is a bit more scary.
Let's break it and try the new feature which was released yesterday. Let's lock these 3 instances so that autoscale events will not destroy them.
Yeah, we can look at that.
So then reduce amount of instances.
Yeah, we can reduce them later. Just let them come up and running first before we start breaking things. So now we can see you have 3 different IP addresses here as well running. So now it's load balancing between 3 different zones. So that's quite cool, especially when you're showing people how fast and easy it is to scale up and scale down. The other thing, if you're just looking into, it's not done yet. I was think I was also uploading a new version of the application, and then you can see how it's performing.
You specify from 3 to 6?
From 3, minimum 3, maximum 6. But the other cool thing with the Beanstalk is that if you want to add a new version, version 2, you can upload that, and it's uploaded, but you've just uploaded to an S3 bucket, and now you can deploy it. So I'm saying that I'm deploying it to this stack, but you can have several stacks in Beanstalk. So you can have one test, one production, 2, 3, 4. So you can clone the stacks and you can swap the URLs and so on. So we can do red-green deployments and things like that. And when you're deploying the application now, if we're quick enough.
What is on monitoring? Can you show monitoring time?
Monitoring?
Yeah.
I guess someone is running hard here, but it's very hard to get the CPU to do something. When it's now, I uploaded a new version of the application. So basically, what it does, it takes one server out of the load balancer, updates the application, put it in, and then continues like that. And if you're saying that you will have a minimum number of servers, it will also fix that for you. I guess. So that's just an example on that. And since our friend here on the first row is playing around, maybe we should also look at a new feature called health check here. But it only updates every 5 minutes, I think. So you can also get detailed health check from within each server. That was added just a few weeks ago. So the Beanstalk is not suitable for everything, but it's really good when you're just playing around and doing stuff, or if you have simple applications. And if you have a simple Java application, PHP application, just throw it in there.
Can you use the Docker deployment?
What? Docker? Yeah, you can.
I mean, have you used it
in Beanstalk? I've just tried it. Yeah. So it's an easy way of doing that as well, because you get the old setting. And you can also get in and play with, you can also play with the load balancer and stuff here after you've launched it. So it's a really cool tool just to see how it works. And for those of you who have not tried that as well, since someone is using so much stuff here, are we done with launching? Not yet. It's typically when I launch the application here also, it takes time because it launches the application and then it waits 60 seconds until it starts the next one and so on. But what you can do here as well, which works very well, is that I can say here, oh, we want to go with an M3 large instead. And you just press apply. And then it starts a new one, gets it in the load balancer, throws one of the smaller ones out. And there's a lot of other cool features. The autoscaler always spread the servers across the zones. So it's always balanced. So you don't get the servers in the same zone. And when it stops the servers, it stops the servers that has been running closest to an hour because you're charged by the hour. So it doesn't kick out the ones that recently started. It kicks out the one that's closest to an hour to save money for the customers. So that's it. And you asked about the auto-scaling, setting the new feature. Scale-in protection was the new one, saying that you will have them always running. I guess that's it. I haven't tried it.
Did you save it and then change the minimum number of instances, minimum max?
Yeah,
I guess what would happen then is they will just continue to do
running. We'll see. We'll see. No, was there any saving there?
You cancel instead of saving.
I did? Oh, I didn't see it because that was not the intention. Action, set scaling, there, sorry. Scale in, protected. I just have to wait for the last to finish up, because you can't reconfigure the Beanstalk while it's doing configuration, which I understand because it would mess up totally. And I remember when Beanstalk was quite new, I tried it and it really, really messed up. I got things that I couldn't stop or remove, and it just, yeah. But I've tried it now, and it's really, really robust. It's very hard to break it, and you can log into the servers and kill them, and you can also, the servers that are launched with, like here, with if you're launching a Java stack with Tomcat, and you're killing the Tomcat process, it just restarts. So they're also launching the, tools to keep sure the processes are running. If you're logging into a server and doing shutdown on it, it's just removed and a new one is added.
One limitation which is stopping some people from using it is that it's very limited amount of AMI which you can use.
It's quite limited on a lot of areas, of course.
But we internally use Ubuntu
and
not Red Hat.
No, so it's limited, and it's a tool which is not suitable for everything, but it's suitable for a good deal of things, and also when you're just doing some benchmarking and trying things out, because it takes time to set up a load balancer and auto-scaling group. Just look back at that later. So basically, what I was just saying, just to summarize, which I think is really cool, is that you're kind of going from an on-premise application to one that is cloud optimized. And how much money you save here, I don't know. Here you should save maybe 50%, maybe more. And then in addition, you get redundancy and auto-scaling and load balancing and all that stuff. So basically that was it. So now we should try to kill it. That was scaling. Let's see what happens if you take it down. Maybe it just chokes.
It will basically just keep the two
Probably.
instances
indefinitely until you change the protection setting again.
It should. But even though you're using some of this,
It might kill it actually.
Was there something new to this for you as well?
It said the maximum low and you cannot save.
If you're putting the wrong configuration into beanstalk, it chokes and then do a rollback. So if you're putting some wrong configuration in one of the fields there, it just says that it's illegal and it doesn't do anything. So I tried to break the infrastructure through beanstalk by setting the wrong numbers in different ways with timeouts and stuff like that, and it doesn't work. It just says this is not allowed, rollback. I also tried adding servers that were only the classic servers, trying to add it to the VPC and the other way around when you were changing instance type, and it didn't break. It just said, started to read the configuration and said this is not allowed, rolling back, and everything was just like it was. So it's very robust. Let's see what we have here. It's one. Oh, was it in search field? Sorry. There it's two. It's two. I saw it on the other one. So it works.
The one that you didn't set the protection on is shutting down.
Yep.
And the two are staying.
New feature, tested, checked, okay. But when you're talking to like old style IT people, and I showed the just doing the configuration here, changing the setting up the load balancing, saying that we'll do it on load balancing on network latency instead of CPU. We changed the server size, stuff like that, just clicking like that. Then the old style IT people said, okay, we're not even close. This is so hard to do for us. So, okay, we're sold.
have you tried to modify resources which Elastic Beanstalk knows about?
Yep.
Let's say add tag or rename some.
I haven't done with the tags, but I've played with the load balancer and tweaked some of the rules in the autoscaler. And for some reason, when you're going through Beanstalk and changing the settings, it's just overwritten. So it's very hard to break, but probably you will, for next time, you can see if you. So basically, that was it. What I was going to talk about.
Can you reuse some elements between different Elastic Beanstalk? Let's say I want two applications use the same ELB.
No, not. I don't think so. No.
So it's all separated.
Separate applications.
So there is some way to run multiple Docker containers, for example, in the same amount of, in the same instance.
Yeah, I think you can. Was that added to Beanstalk now, so you can run separate Docker containers in the same? Yeah, it is, but not applications, no, because it basically launched one server with, like, say, Tomcat running.
There are probably some solutions. If you need to modify a file system or install something, what we were doing is that we simply use our launch user data to download some configuration and actually provision these images.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's skip to Erling and his talk.
I forgot to do that once. Kept running for a few days or weeks before I remember it.
How many people are on the live stream?
Just two.
Two?
They commented that they enjoyed watching it from London and from somewhere else.
Actually,
I think the other guys just watching.
So while we were starting, I invited Erling to come talk to us today because I think he's a very good startup history in AWS, and we have this kind of morning coffee now and then,
yes.
where we're discussing like technology and strategy and what's cool and hot and not.
Can I move this?
Also, the reason I triggered was that Erling told me about, or his company is providing a service which we started using early in Webstep. It was kind of a beta release-ish thing, and so I've seen how it's grown, and also heard what he's been struggling with and how he's been dealing with different providers and legislation and stuff like that.
Yes. So, my name is Erling. I am one of the founders of a startup called CVPartner, which is basically a software as a service tool, and we're running everything in the cloud. And like Anders mentioned, I'll try to share some of my experiences from that. So these days we are running most of our stuff on Amazon or AWS, but in order to sort of take you through the journey we've been through, I thought I'd start with the very beginning. So coming into this startup world, I had been sort of exposed to and read a lot about this lean startup methodology and what is probably called customer development these days. So the idea is basically to try to expose some part of your business, so that could be the product or a business model, whatever, as early as possible to potential customers, so that if you get feedback and you get good feedback, ideally someone say, yeah, I would be willing to pay for that service, then you continue, or if not, you try to change course or maybe give up, which we haven't done yet. So obviously, in the very early days, I didn't want to focus a lot on infrastructure. I just wanted to throw something out there I could show. So the obvious choice that's probably 3 years ago, so maybe more. The obvious choice was Heroku, which is just git push and you get something live. And I was quite good. I was good enough for us to get a prototype up and running. And if you ever play with Heroku, you can see that if you need to add some additional services like a search engine or a different key value store or something, you could always find that. There's always third-party vendors that could provide that, and you could sort of plug these things in. So in a way, it's working well. But as you know, we did transition to AWS after a while. It didn't take too long actually, but some of the drivers for us moving from Heroku to AWS was, well, first of all, security. So when you use something like Heroku, you sort of pick different third-party vendors here and there. So after a while, you're kind of exposed, or you put your trust in a lot of different places. And we moved everything over to Amazon and sort of hosted our own database cluster on Amazon within a VPC. And actually, just about a week after we moved everything out of the third-party vendor on Heroku, one of them were actually hacked, so we were quite lucky, and sort of feel like we got close, but we made it in time. So I think that's one of the big ironies of running a software as a service tool. You have to try to convince your customers that you are secure and you take security very seriously, but that means you probably can't trust too many other software as a service providers. So we trust AWS, but we don't really trust anyone else. And the other sort of driver is, I guess Anders mentioned that a bit, is the privacy or the sort of what Datatilsynet or the EU privacy regulation laws sort of enforces. People are very aware of that these days, so you have to have a clear and good answer to that. For us, that has been solved through running entirely within the EU. So we run everything, today we run everything in Ireland, and that was the only region available up until not too long ago. So by running everything within the EU and also through our contracts, we got away with that. So that's been good enough, but it's been very important. And that is obviously harder to do on Heroku, especially when you pick different third-party vendors who may or may not have an within EU option. Maybe that's gotten better these days, but it was typically the new stuff came out in the US first, and then eventually they added something in the EU. So that's been important. And then there's been a few technological drivers. So the simplest thing is basically we needed to install some fonts somewhere to have them available in the system because we wanted to render some documents. So by running up our own instances on Amazon, we had full control. So that was the simple way, one of the simple technological drivers. The other ones is more when we have some third-party sort of proprietary software we use underneath, and most of them also supply their software as a software as a service. So we could just use their API, but then as you sort of start to get different dependencies, you kind of have to trust them. So one thing is obviously still security. The other things are what happens if they go down or if they decide to do maintenance one day. And then if your service consists of lots of different services, then that might you're not in control anymore. So we try to host everything within our VPC on AWS. So we try to pick vendors who have some kind of on-site option. I might get back to that, but that has given us a sense of control, and we can enforce the redundancy we want to, and we can choose when not to do maintenance, etc. So that has been important. It did lead to me having to, brush up my operation skills a bit. So I have spent, quite a few hours or nights, etc., understanding how to or at least partly automate this, and making sure I can, at least I've been using Chef, which I slightly regret, but it does the job of allowing us to quickly, replicate a server. So whether that's an app server or some database server, whatever, at least we can push a button and we get another one. So it's easy for us to scale out horizontally or replace something when something goes wrong. So running this on Amazon has been fairly painless once you figure out how to get it up and configure the VPC with the VPN access and all that security groups and everything. So once you sort that out and you get this stuff up and running, it's been fairly painless. It usually just keeps running. We had a few issues. I remember in the beginning, I woke up one day and lots of alarms had gone off, and one of the servers was just not responding. So I couldn't log into it, couldn't actually reboot it. It was kind of stuck. So obviously then you have to start a new one and make sure you can sort of replace the one that was there before. That hasn't happened lately, and I feel like Amazon is maturing and becoming more stable. But at least in the early days, the rules was pretty much that anything can go away at any point in time. So you have to think about redundancy a bit. I'm not sure if that is still as much the case. It doesn't feel like that, but that is at least one of the rules. And the other thing that has happened more frequently is that you'll get an email from AWS saying you have to reboot this instance within this state, because there's some kind of problems with the underlying hardware, and if you don't reboot it, we'll do it for you by this time. And obviously, given there are some problems with the underlying hardware, it has happened that they have rebooted it like a week before they said they would. So I thought I had some time, but then something happened and it was rebooted before. So whenever I get these emails these days, I just try to reboot the instances as soon as possible, just to be sure. But the other thing is it's been very easy. So these kind of, basically we run the Ruby on Rails on a few servers. We run Closure on a few servers. We run a MongoDB cluster. We run an Elasticsearch cluster. We do all that. It's very easy to get set up. And also in terms of the third-party sort of proprietary stuff, that has also been very easy to set up. Sometimes they just give you some kind of executable, or they give you at least some instructions on how to set up the environment, and it's usually quite easy to automate that as well. The latest one was actually even nicer. So I got the spec that's saying, okay, you have to use this OS, you have to set it up like this. And I started a machine based on an AMI I could find that seemed to be closest to what they were expecting. But then I got into some problems. I just emailed them and asked them if they had like a recommended AMI. And they replied, well, just give us your Amazon ID and we actually have like an AMI with everything on it, so you don't have to worry about it at all. So that's a very nice way to just drop in a third-party proprietary service as well into your VPC. Just have to make sure you configure the security groups, etc. So that's obviously very painless to do. So we're quite happy about running this, and we feel we're in control. We can evolve, we can scale out whenever we need to. But the other sort of complicated thing is trying to explain this to others, or at least there are made some interesting observations about how people outside perceive something that is hosted in the cloud. So one side of it was, so I was talking to an old friend about a month ago, and he was also doing a talk on AWS, and someone had asked him, like, can you compare what you're doing now to how it was before? And he was like, before AWS, that's 10 years ago. Well, I think we found out it was actually 6 years ago, but still, for some people, running stuff on AWS is just the default. It's just a given. You don't even spend a thought on trying to run this on premise or on some custom hardware somewhere. But for others, it's more of a very new thing. So going out to customers or trying to sell this, even though people are quite up to date technically, they're still used to the old model of hosting things or buying software. So explaining this kind of multi-tenancy model can be quite hard. So people don't necessarily understand that their account is running on the same stack, same servers as other companies. Especially when evaluating our system, we've had people running like test cases or writing long test scripts and getting multiple people to go through and sort of test our application. So what obviously happens is that if we discover that there is a bug, that bug we might fix that during the day, and they will struggle to replicate it. Or if there's a UX bug, in terms of we understand that the flow is wrong. It's like we take that button away and we'll automate it, or we'll just move it around or completely change how the application is working. So if they come back a week later and they try to replicate the test script, then it's like you can't find the button, you can't find how it's impossible to do the task, or it's probably easier, but you can't follow the script anymore. So that opened up for some interesting conversations. So we said we can't really freeze our production environment. It's in use. We have to evolve it. And the same goes for people worried about performance. So what we do is we basically, so we scale out horizontally when we need to, and we have quite a lot of monitoring. So we use New Relic, amongst other things. That gives us a pretty good indication of how performance is at any point in time. And you could, most of the times it's quite easy to find out, okay, what is taking time? Where is it a bad sort of algorithm, or is it just a lot of load, or is it something else? And we try to explain this to customers that if something starts to go slow, then we'll find out why, and we'll fix it quite fast most of the times. But that can be hard to explain as well. So we had people running performance tests against our production environment. We said, well, if things start to go slow, we'll just scale up. So obviously we knew when the performance test was going on, so we just made sure we had a lot of servers standing by. So someone might call that cheating, but it was kind of a good exercise for us to know that we were able to scale out pretty quickly, and we are able to handle quite a large load if we have to. So I think it's okay, but just explaining that sort of different model still can take some time, whereas people are still not sort of used to it. But obviously that having that possibility to sort of iterate quickly, respond to any kind of incidents or feedback kind of immediately. I mean, the infrastructure is not the problem or the bottleneck anymore. It's more down to manpower or focus or time, but it's not. You don't spend a lot of time with infrastructure. That's just more or less, it's there, and it usually just works. So that's very nice. I think one sort of challenge with the at least with the multi-tenancy model is, so one thing is you obviously have to be very strict in terms of authorization, how you share data. We try to split things up when we can. So for instance, our search engines, we have different indexes for all the different clients. But another thing you have to think about is, so if one client starts using a lot of resources, that could affect others. So we had an incident where there was one client playing with our API and was hitting the really slow part of the API, which was like, so that was starting to consume all the different threads on all the different servers, and then eventually it sort of really degraded performance. So what we put in place now is we throttle the API, so one client can only make as many requests per second or per. So there are some things you have to be a bit aware of when you do this multi-tenancy thing, which has been interesting. Also, so that is about how you tell the story or how people perceive the software as a service model from the outside, and we've gotten pretty good at explaining that lately. But I tried to just think about how we might evolve this over time. So obviously we feel that betting on AWS was the right thing to do. It still feel like that was the right horse to bet on. It's still moving. It's moving very fast actually, and it feels like it is at least ahead of the game, or at least on top of the game in terms of its competition. But one sort of challenge is almost like Anders did in the introduction, just the amount of new features coming out. So it's obviously a good thing, but just staying on top of that, in addition to as a startup, staying on top of all the other things happening with all the different technologies, it's hard to find time to play with everything and learn and actually know what the best way forward is. There's so many options. So you can host it using Beanstalk, you can host it yourself, you can host it on some kind of container service. There's so many different options, which is very good, but it's sort of, I'm not sure we leverage the platform enough yet, and there's probably a lot of potential to still try to get there. But I guess that's a good thing. I'm just hoping. I can see as they are adding a lot of functionality and new features very fast, they do add some complexity, I think. So whether they can handle that, or if that means that at some point they will start shutting down things that doesn't work out, I don't know. I hope they don't end up, like Google, having everything in beta and then shutting it down. So I hope they can manage that, but it's a small concern I have, I guess. And also someone mentioned the safe harbor agreement earlier. So we got around with that so far by saying we have it inside the EU, and if we do something outside, we refer to the safe harbor agreement, or always make sure any other kind of vaguely related third parties are under the safe harbor agreement. But given that's been some noise around that, or it might not be valid anymore, then we're obviously, that could be an issue. We can see that AWS is doing a lot to sort of mitigate that. And I'm sure they'll find a way around it. So obviously opening new locations in both Frankfurt and London is a good sign. I'm not too afraid of this, but it is a concern at some level. So that, and I guess that is sort of my final thoughts. That today we have everything running in our land. To be able to provide our sort of client with a redundant setup in at least one other region within the EU would be quite interesting. So that gives us some challenges in terms of, how do you actually replicate the databases? Do you have one cold and one warm region, or is there some kind of cool architecture that allows us to sort of seamlessly leverage both regions at the same time? I don't know yet.
Next meetup workshop.
Yeah. So that would be interesting if someone has any input on that. And also, I mean, just to mention, like the new stuff, like the hosted Elasticsearch option, which is fairly new, I think. We definitely want to move to that. But I'm curious then if there's any downsides to using the hosted option versus running it ourselves. So whether there's any kind of lock-in or any kind of maintenance issues, whatever, I don't know yet. But it feels, it's from the outside, it looks very nice to just be able to just use that.
I think I looked into it. I don't know if other has looked into it yet. It's quite not. I don't think it's quite not there yet. It needs what?
It's ancient. I mean, version is ancient.
But also the configuration and stuff like that, because it's quite hard to get it to fit in the same security model as
okay.
the rest.
Yeah.
You couldn't launch an endpoint in a VPC or something.
Yeah, it's problems with that. It's problem with security grips and a lot of stuff. So it's something that just thrown in.
Yes.
Not like the cloud search. It's more like
So it's very early days still anyway.
I think we need at least 2 or 3 more coffees on that.
Yes. That sounds good. So probably not moving to that tomorrow.
But the API gateway, because I remember we discussed
yes.
when that was launched and you had the throttling problem and stuff like that.
Yes.
Would be
yes.
So
that's definitely interesting to look at, and obviously we have quite a few different services now, but we're not quite microservicey yet. So that is one thing I'm kind of hoping to move a bit more towards. So and there's obviously a lot of different ways to sort of leverage the AWS platform to sort of enable that. But then it does come with some kind of complexity and challenges. So we'll see if we get there. So I think that that was pretty much what I had. So if you have any questions or remarks or whatever.
Sure. Questions as always.
Yes.
First question, you have Aws on first slide.
Yes.
What kind of tools do you use from that?
We basically use the guidelines. So that we found quite a few, there's tons of documents, but we found quite a good set of principles or like a checklist. So on all the different topics, there was a checklist, and there was, I think it was 3 categories. It was like A, B, and C. And A was like very basic, and B was quite secure, and you had C, which was the extreme. So we went through the most important ones and tried to at least hit the B level on most things to make sure we were up to date. And AWS obviously helps with a lot of that, but not everything. A lot of the things you have to put in the application. And, it comes down to how you handle sessions and all that. Yes.
Second question.
That's it.
How do you manage infrastructure now?
We use Chef still, and then a few scripts here and there, and it's not. No. So that's
why.
Well, basically we started out using Chef before OpsWorks came along, and then trying to retrofit it into that model. I haven't quite gotten my head around that. So and I think when I heard about Docker, I was thinking we should go for that instead. Haven't gotten to that, but instead of trying to spend a lot of time getting OpsWorks to work, I was rather intending to use the Docker features. But I'm not sure. I feel when Docker came out, everyone was very hyped about it, and now I hear some mixed messages. So I'm not sure. Yes. So.
Yeah, I have one question regarding the Datatilsynet.
Yes.
Have you had any direct dialogue with them? Or
well, we had initially when we were starting up and didn't have a clue. We called them a few times and got a bit. I mean, they were kind of vague. So obviously, if you call them and you say we're building this software as a service tool and how does this work and what kind of regulations do we have to follow, etc. But we are kind of what's called a data behandler. So we just sort of process the data on behalf of our clients, and that is regulated to our contract with them. So at least that's how we think is the right way to do it. So our clients need sort of permissions from their employees to be able to use their data, and then we just process data on behalf of them. And obviously, then we have to not process. You have to be a bit careful. I mean, we try to be very careful about the data and in terms of security and how we treat the data and all that. But we haven't had any more direct contact with Datatilsynet after that.
So you haven't gotten any concrete feedback from them on if running it within the EU regions and them being compliant with the new EU directive ISO standards would be sufficient in regards to the data behandler?
Not from Datatilsynet, but we had quite a few head of legal departments in different large clients that have looked at this quite significantly, I think. So I think for one client we might be implementing a consent when you sign up initially, so for each employee as well. So maybe that is how you really have to do it. So, but we're working on that. Yeah, I'm not an expert in that, but I think we got more or less right on it.
Also, just a comment. Talked to a lawyer, which is quite good on things related to that in general, and that was related to the new directive, which is might be coming, I think, what we should be prepared of. And he said that there's a lot of things there you have to be aware of, but most of them can be just signed off.
Yes.
So basically, what it says is, one thing is how you're gathering data and storing it. Another thing is that you have to delete the data when you don't need it anymore. So if you kind of are signing a contract, if you have a contract with a supplier and his email and phone number is in the agreement and you have it in your files, actually you have to delete it when he's quitting. Unless you just say in the contract that we will keep these records just for the benefit of business, and then you can keep it. So, as I said, it's more about being cautious about having a sign-off on what you're storing and how you're doing it, instead of trying to do it the other way.
Yes.
Which is quite scary when you stuff.
Yes.
The fines you can get.
So I guess you have to be aware of what you actually have to put into the contract then.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think getting some legal advice on that part is probably a good idea. Yeah.
But what's also interesting is thinking about, you talked about before AWS or not, and probably for your company wouldn't have been a company.
Yes.
You had to do it on premise because you have to have some huge upfront investment.
Yes, I completely agree. It would have been very hard to get started at all, and obviously it would have been very hard for us to say that we are actually able to scale, and we might have hit the wall where we couldn't scale, or we would have one huge server with everything running on it, and I can't imagine how hard that would have been actually. So,
especially in Norway.
Yes.
In the US, it would have been easier to find investors and stuff like that.
Yeah. But it would have, cost a lot more, and you would. I mean, it's very nice to just dynamically add the server and experiment a bit and shut things down, and it just gives us I don't know, sense of security that if one server falls down, we can always replace it. And we try to build everything, so even the internal stuff is always load balanced as far as we can build it. We try to choose things that are, web scale, whatever you call it. But
you use Mongo, right?
yes, yes. So I do regret a bit using Mongo, but we'll see. We'll see.
But if you started with Heroku,
yes,
it was one of the recommended options.
Yes, yes. And it was a cool thing back in the days. And, but now looking at AWS having Postgres 9.4 within RDS, it probably would have been a lot easier to handle that. Probably could do the same job in a way. So Mongo has been nice when we evolve the service, but it's not necessarily as nice when it stabilizes it.
It was mentioned earlier on, like looking into using the AWS managed search solution.
Yes.
And like pros and cons on this, and I think that something that one should consider and try to consider as well as good as possible is also, like, do you need any special elements for this like software?
Yes.
Because as an example, we were well on our way to migrate our database to RDS.
Yes.
And then at a point in time during that process, we discovered that we were going to start using a special module for that database. Yeah. And that module is actually not available on the RDS version. So that's something that, like, in general, you have to consider. On the other hand, and we're like, okay, so what if they added that one module tomorrow?
Yes.
And then we're thinking, okay, if there was one module today that we're missing, it might be another module tomorrow.
That's true.
So then we decided, okay, we won't be able to, or we don't dare to go to the RDS option.
Yeah.
But for other things where you know that, okay, I will be using more or less like the vanilla install version, I absolutely cannot see any special things that I need to add to this like initial setup.
Yeah.
Then it's probably, I mean, if that was the case for us and RDS, we would be running RDS because we would like to ship off handling all things database to AWS.
Exactly.
So just really look into if the AWS managed version is like that you're safe on. Okay, that will be sufficient for you before you choose it.
Yeah. And it's but it's the nature of a startup is it's very hard to predict the future. So it's that is obviously a risk. So at least it has to be easy to move off of it, and I'm not sure it is. I heard some things about it's a bit hard to get the data out as well. So I'm not sure. It's probably easier to get it in. It's not happening.
What kind of services do you use? Beside of more or less traditional EC2, S3?
We don't really use anything fancy, so it's like ELBs and VPC.
You mentioned API gateway.
We're not using it yet. We found we're using throttling as a Rails library that stores requests in a key value store and sort of handles it that way. So, but I'm still planning to use the API gateway. We haven't done that yet. And there's all these features that should use that. The new security thing on top as well. I can't remember. Yeah, it looks very interesting. So that should get that in place as well.
So since you mentioned that you're using Rails, what do you use for deployment?
I use Capistrano, which is and the old one. Yes. So and that sort of works, but I don't know if maybe this is out of context, but deploying Ruby and Clojure is very different. So the Ruby deployment process, it takes forever and it writes thousands of files and builds a lot and then restarts it but deploying Clojure is basically just copying one file and then restarting a service. So that is also a bit interesting. So yeah.
Do you use any services for continuous integration?
Not yet, no. A very small team.
So how code from developers go live?
Yes, just yeah. I mean, I've been using a lot of continuous deployment before I started this, but we're just like there's just me deploying so far. But we are sort of gradually becoming larger, so I think that's when you really need it. So when you're like 1 or 2 developers, you can't get away without, and it's just might not be worth it. But when you become a team, it's very important. So it's just a very kind of rude trade-off you've been making. So I think, yeah, I'm trying to break some rules. I worked at a place where there was a lot of developers who'd done the proper agile thing, just like TDD, BDD, pairing, continuous integration, deployment, everything by the book. And then started a new company with the same people, but then just decided to break all the rules and just see what happened. And it was quite interesting. But if you do it, as long as you do it responsibly, you can try to break some of the rules and you can put them back in when you see you need them, but it's not always you need them up front. But, I'm not saying we're doing everything correct. It's you just try to move as fast as you can, but still somewhat responsibly. It is easier when you're a small team than you're a large team.
Backups.
Sorry?
Do you do backups?
Yes.
I guess it's a cost consideration as well.
Yes.
I mean, like when you put in effort to set up the full CD solution.
Yes. And it's also about feedback, right? So to get feedback fast enough by running it, without or with them, it's all these things. But we're getting to a point where it starts to make sense. But when you start out and just prototyping, the first thing you do is, well, at least I don't think the first thing you do should be to set up the whole thing. But at some point, it's very nice to have it up and running, for sure. But I've been on projects where we spent all day just fixing this build, and it's kind of choked me a bit. So it's, as long as it sort of helps you, it's a good thing. But if it stops you or slows you down, and trying to be very pragmatic about everything, really. Except the security, you can't really. You have to be on top of it, I think. Yes. Well, thank you.
So Anton, are you going to market do some marketing for your meetup? As a last comment.
7% left in my veteran. So, 14th of December, everyone who's interested in managing infrastructure, AWS infrastructure as code, using Terraform is welcome to the same room, as far as I remember, 5 o'clock. So, just welcome. And as you mentioned that you have some scripts and some tooling which you kind of inherited or invented, I'm seeing this kind of daily, and I think I found a solution.
Oh, awesome.
So this solution is going to be presented. It's called Terraform. Yes, you're welcome.
Okay.